Yes, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here. Thank you for coming. So, as Richard mentioned, I am a senior lecturer at the University of Technology, Sydney, but I'm also a children's book author, and I'm also a father. And it's kind of summed up in this most common question I get from other academics. So this is a stock photo of a sciencey looking person, and that's not their real name. But the email itself is one that I've received. It says, I'm also a scientist, and I happen to be an aspiring author as well. You've written dozens of children's books, so starting with Quantum Physics for Babies, which was published mid last year. And now the latest is Astrophysics for Babies. And there's some picture books in there as well. And you have 4 kids and an active academic career. So what is your secret? And I thought that was a funny question. You know, my secret, I thought any answer to that would be kind of like an infomercial. So initially, I didn't give an answer. I didn't think about it. I just said, hard work and a little bit of luck, and you'll get there. And speaking of luck, I get to travel all around the world as an academic talking about quantum physics. I talk to students giving lectures and other researchers. I get to talk to business leaders and entrepreneurs about quantum technology. But since becoming an author, now I talk to science enthusiasts, high school students, elementary school students, teachers, journalists, and even now, because the books are for babies, parents, and toddlers. And I've received lots of questions, obviously, about quantum physics, which is unsurprising. But what I didn't expect were questions about my personal life and my philosophy towards parenting. So parents really want to know, okay, how do you really teach kids quantum physics? And the questions are kind of phrased in this, what's the secret sort of way? And these are difficult, obviously, to answer because, well, there's not really an easy answer or even an answer at all to such a question. But in trying to provide some answer that was honest and as concise as possible, something kind of started to coalesce in my mind after answering all these questions. So there's this old saying, it's kind of cliche, if you don't know where you came from, then you can't know where you're going. So I thought maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe I've been too busy as an academic trying to publish and work through the system, building a marriage, building a family, that I never really stopped and thought about what was it about my upbringing that allowed me to do this. Maybe there was a secret. And if there was, then I should maybe be more thoughtful in using those tools that I've developed in my upbringing with my own children. So I kind of thought about it. I have a pretty bad memory, and I don't really remember much about my childhood, but luckily, my parents took lots of pictures and lots of videos, so I bothered my mom, but I guess not really because I probably don't call her enough, so definitely call your mom. I got some old home videos from my dad and set to it. And I think what I found was kind of a common thread that I'm going to tell you about today. The story in doing my research probably starts a bit earlier, though, with my grandfather. So he served briefly as a radio operator in World War II, and then he stayed in radio his whole life. And he dabbled in all sorts of aspects of radio, including hosting and then eventually advertising. But the way I remember him was like in his retirement, where he just always had this experience where he wanted to perfect his surroundings in terms of sound. So he always had, the best sound system in his apartment, and he just loved these devices that produce sound. And I think that's what led to my father being kind of a tinkerer of electronics as well. My living room growing up had like these ever-evolving handcrafted sound systems the house was full of electronics, but I'm surrounded by electronics here today, not like these kinds of connected devices. It was exposed wires and DIY gadgets. These were my dad's toys. But he wasn't a licensed electrician. In fact, I don't think he's formally trained in anything, but that didn't stop him from being called what was known as a jack of all trades. And so I see some young people in the audience today think, if he were my age today, then he would have a big beard and a tattoo, and you'd find him at the makerspace building a custom gear for Fixie or something like that. But the point is, he built stuff, and it was using whatever materials were available. And as you could see from the clip, safety really wasn't much of a concern. So just put a clamp on a desk and attach a lamp to it, and that'll be the light for the kids. And so really I saw firsthand what it was to play with things that weren't marketed and packaged as toys, and play with things in ways that other people hadn't thought of before. My brother and I joined my dad in the shop, which was the garage, and we were wiring and cutting and hammering and painting. That is one of his homemade speakers there. And I actually still remember and can prove that I got cut by that reciprocal saw. There's a little fading scar. But then there was a shift, right? So the consumer electronics started to get cheaper, and these DIY gadgets were replaced by electronic chips that were covered in plastic. In the late 80s, personal computers became affordable for middle-class income families, and I had access to Ataris and Commodores, Nintendos, Segas, and eventually personal computers and the internet. And what this shift entailed was something entirely new. No longer did I play with the wires and the physical things, the hardware. Now I played with software. And as an added bonus, having a twin brother, I had to become a rather robust user. I think he had to be a little bit more robust than I did. So I was an early adopter of many new gadgets, and that included gadgets with software. I wouldn't say I came of age with the personal computer. I think that is a bit too early. That's Gen X. I'm kind of at the cusp. I'm an elder millennial, maybe. So those were the people that needed to learn to code to use personal computers. Those were my friends' older siblings. I came of age with graphical user interfaces, not lines of computer code. And I'm talking about the kinds of software that my generation grew up with and that our parents had to use in their office jobs. So Windows, word processors and spreadsheets, QuickBooks, Photoshop, and eventually web browsers and all of our smartphone apps. And I played with software the same way I watched my dad play with his electronic toys and tools. So this here is the very first home video on the set that my dad gave me. And what you can see is that rather than for its intended use, like film your family, he just starts goofing around and playing with it. And probably like in a way that the designers really never intended. And so I've inherited this behavior. I open a toy or gadget and immediately and uncontrollably start testing and trying to figure out how it works without reading the instructions. So more often than not, I can kind of get it to work within a few minutes, and occasionally I find some new and interesting use for it. So the entirety of my life has been this user, tester, tinkerer, and eventually builder of software. And I think there's an apt name for this as well, a hacker, the 21st century version of the jack of all trades. Of course, we're all users of software today, but this hacker mentality is difficult to achieve and understand because software today is designed to be robust against this exact behavior. So developers and the companies they work for don't necessarily want users to play with their software in ways they don't intend. They want to, I think, perhaps avoid those one-star reviews on the App Store because it has to work fast and it has to work almost in an expected way. And perhaps you've seen people on the bus just doing this motion over and over and over again. So this isn't the kind of play that I'm talking about, right? People play with software today, right? Again, on their smartphones, think Flappy Bird or Crossy Road with this is the only thing that you do with the software. I'm talking about software where you have this freedom to like, follow your own curiosity in playing with it. And so in terms of that play, I think the single waking activity I've done most in my life is play with software. And I think this is the secret. This is my secret. My dad was a jack of all trades, and I am a jack of all software, a hacker. And to make this a little more concrete, I'm going to give you a few snapshots over the many years of how I've used software with this hacker mentality in mind. So let's go back to high school. The internet wasn't a big thing in suburban Canada until the late 90s. Of course, when the first internet access store opened up and there was an affordable option, my dad was an early adopter. And perhaps you might remember this sound, which is like burned into my mind. All right, that's enough of that. So my high school, of course, had internet access, like all high schools would have, but it was in the library, and not very many people used it. If you wanted to view a web page, how it worked back then was somebody somehow found out about a web page, maybe through some links from other web pages, and if you wanted someone else to know about that web page, then you would have to write down the web address on a piece of paper, and then they would go to Internet Explorer or Netscape and type that address in, and voila, they would see the web page. If you didn't know that address, then you would never see the web page. But then one thing came along. Does anyone remember web crawler? I feel like maybe I don't need to lecture you here on the history of, of internet search, but just in case, this was the kind of precursor to Google. This is an archived screenshot from 1996, I believe. And by the way, if you thought like fake news and conspiracy theories are a recent sort of phenomenon, have a look at the example that you should search in like one of the first search engines ever. Alien abduction UFO Roswell. So web crawler. It gave kind of terrible search results, but it was one of the first search engines. I checked, actually, it still works. You can go to webcrawler.com, and the first thing I searched for in webcrawler.com was Google, and the first hit is Amazon, which is which is a bit strange, but maybe not. So I don't need to tell you here about the kind of technology today that goes into the kind of seemingly simple task of web search, but back then it was more difficult. You had to be what I would call a search engine hacker. I mean, look at the example. Why would you have to put alien abduction in quotation marks, but UFO Roswell not in quotation marks? So these were the kind of like tricks that you had to play back then, whereas now I type one letter. I haven't even decided what I want to search for, and you guys have figured out already what I want to search for. I think there was like this brief terminology shortly after Google, before search really became kind of this intuitive thing. Google foo, I don't know if you guys remember that. It almost disappeared as fast as it arrived. And so I had this kind of Google foo in high school, and I was one of the very few people that used web search to complete my assignments. And kind of as an added bonus, if you were relatively good at computers and you were a teenager, you could use your web search skills for some other things, but I didn't include a slide for that. So I used like a map once to drive to one of the Carolinas. It was kind of awful, the map, I mean. Most of my driving has been local, and for that I don't use maps. I've never actually picked out and unfolded one of these real maps. .com was in full swing by the time I got my first driver's license, and I used this old but again still existent website, MapQuest. And if you go and you look at it, it looks the same pretty much as mapping software today. You can pan and zoom, and you could ask it for directions, and it would get you from A to B. But that wasn't really necessarily what you wanted. You wanted the fastest route, the shortest route, a route that didn't contain traffic, or a route that contained a new street, or an old alley that was never part of the map. And so what you had to do was kind of hack the route, right? And in doing so, you had to be the one that was really kind of looking and panning around and optimizing it. So today, mapping software is much, much better for driving directions, but I wouldn't say it is for walking directions. And I'm hoping that it's not like a news flash that perhaps in other parts of the world people still walk to places. I've noticed that there's a lot of cars in America. So I use Google Maps in walking around Australia for walking directions, but oftentimes it misses things, right? I mean, you have a campus here, so you'll know that there are pathways that you want to take, say, that are well trodden through fields that just don't show up on a map. And so you have to sort of manually change your route. And the thing is, I don't feel like I ever had an innate sense of direction. I don't think that that's really a thing. But through practice, I've developed a pretty good sense of direction. And that practice is only available through the ability to play with software like Google Maps. And by looking at the area here, just this morning, I found out, looking at my local area and then zooming out, I found out that currently I'm further north than where I grew up in Canada, which is, I think, so surprising to me, and I think maybe surprising to you, because you normally think Canada's north of here. But in this case, it's south, well, southwest. And again, today I'm kind of losing this practice, because now I kind of just shout at my phone, right? Like, okay, Google, navigate home, right? And losing this practice with software I feel like it's kind of okay, because this is software that I've used in the past, and now as I move to different jobs, I'm using different kinds of software. And as a university lecturer and researcher, I use all sorts of various software, and in fact, now I have to create software. So it's quite small, but there you see, maybe you recognize some Python code where I'm answering scientific questions. So the software that I've created above produces an answer to a scientific question that you see below. And then I use LaTeX, a bit of software, and a whole chain of software to produce academic papers. So as academics, we write the code that creates the journal articles. And then I use yet other software, including this software that didn't work so well just a second ago, to create presentations to present those results to my colleagues. So that whole chain, I'm using all of this software, and in many cases, I'm the creator of software, and as an academic who's not really trained in software development, I would say it's very much hacking your way through it. And being able to use software efficiently in this way really sets you ahead in a field where it's not common, right? Not every academic even would touch a line of code. When I'm not in the office, so in the evenings, I have a hobby, as you can see from the stack of books. I write children's books. And unsurprisingly, it makes use of software. This software here, maybe you recognize it. It's called Inkscape. So it's a free and open source piece of software. And I'm quite sure that its intended purpose was not to create picture books for children. And by being able to use this software, which I use in my research to create scientific diagrams, I can make myself appear like an artist, even though, as you can see, I'm just manipulating geometric shapes and vectors. This image is part of Goodnight Lab, which was my first picture book that was published by Source Books. And I'm quite proud to say that I annoyed their design team enough that when they respond to my emails anyways, they also use Inkscape now, even though they hadn't heard of it before. And speaking of publishing, I actually used some translation software to negotiate my first international book contract. At the time, I was self-published and didn't know anything about publishing. So I contacted some publishers in China using I think it was Google Translate, or I'll say it's Google Translate anyway, since I'm here. And in using translation software, now I actually write children's books directly for the Chinese market. And so my response would be, dear anonymous, handsome, sciencey looking guy, I have an answer for you. Of course, I don't manage alone. I have an amazing family, an amazing partner, but I also have software. And without the efficient use and ability to play with software, the first book, Quantum Physics for Babies, certainly wouldn't exist. And as you saw, all of my other illustrated books wouldn't exist, and even my entire academic career wouldn't exist. And I think that's due to my upbringing, which was kind of perfect for making use of this evolving technology. But these successes are kind of a product of that unique environment, culture, and opportunities that I was given. And so I have to thank my parents for that. But the problem with success stories is that they're very hard to repeat, right? So we don't have that same environment and culture today. So as a parent myself, I can't repeat the same thing that my parents did. But I can kind of use this spirit. That is, I can give my children experiences and opportunities to play with tools and technology, but that is not enough. I think the real lesson from my childhood story is that children will be attracted to the ideas and the mannerisms and activities that their parents or their teachers or their friends show with genuine interest. In today's sort of educational conversation, we're always talking about STEM, science and technology and engineering, mathematics. And I'm not too worried about my own children's interest in STEM because they see me showing enthusiasm for it constantly. But I want to give you kind of an example of the theme, which is that my children don't really see me doing science much anymore because I'm doing that in the office, and then when I'm at home, I'm working on children's books. So they see me writing books more than they see me doing science. And so I was quite amused, but in hindsight, not all that surprised when my children would show up in the morning and they would say, I made this, I made a book, because they see daddy making books, and the tools are actually quite easy to find, and without any sort of, I never thought to have them write books. I encouraged them to do science and do experiments, but now they show up writing books. Another amusing story is that I once gave a presentation, kind of a more choreographed presentation at the World Science Festival in Brisbane, where I was on stage trying to inspire high school students to get a job in science. The title was Cool Jobs. And my 4-year-old son was watching, and afterward he said to me, Daddy, maybe when you grow up, you can actually do science and not just talk about science. So I'm a bit worried that I'm not demonstrating the practice of science enough. I'm wondering, the parents that ask me these questions about, this secret, how do I, I've read the books, and what's next, right? How do I continue along this path? And I wonder what sort of interests and curiosities they're instilling in their children, and what opportunities and experiences they are giving to them, and what they're kind of showing them with genuine interest. So I want to tell you about one more thing that I'm interested in, that my children, I think, are uniquely placed to take advantage of, if they so wish. So maybe I should have had a sound for this. So welcome to the quantum realm. Quantum physics has sort of a reputation for being a mysterious thing, but the way I like to explain it in kind of the least sort of mystical way to a perfect group of technology-minded people is that it's just a mathematical theory that works well for some physical phenomenon and not so well or not so conveniently with others. So it's a mathematical theory that works well when physical things are very well isolated from an environment. So if you can identify some region of the world that's isolated from its environment, then describing that with this mechanism of quantum physics will work really well. And atoms, when you think about it, they're very well isolated. I mean, everything is mostly space, and these atoms are very far away from any other atom or particle. And so that's why quantum physics works really well to describe them. Now, what we're doing today is trying to build massive quantum technology devices. And again, the only reason or the only way it will be well described by quantum physics is if we can isolate these things from their environment. Okay, great. But you might think, what has quantum done for me lately? Well, in fact, quantum physics is the most precise and well-studied theory of science that we have to date, and is the basis for pretty much all the technology that we enjoy today. So the GPS, like that map I showed you, requires precise timing afforded by atomic clocks. Atomic clocks themselves has the word atom right in it, so obviously quantum physics plays a role in that. There's a medical scan there, so that involves looking at the spins of nuclear atoms in the body. We have lasers, which write and read onto compact discs and CDs. Quantum states of light are required to send signals through fiber optic cables across huge distances, which connect all of us by the internet. And what are these things connecting? They're connecting computers, the billions upon billions of transistors that are around us in the world today. And the only reason that we can do that is because of our understanding of semiconductor physics, which is based on quantum mechanics. But today, we're doing something a little bit different. All of that was based on big things, like things that you can see and touch with your hand. And the kind of quantum physics that plays a role there is what's describing a lot of quantum things that are behaving all in the same way. Now we have access to individual quantum systems. So on the right-hand side, you see an ion trap that can trap individual atoms. And for certain ions, you can actually see them. So I got a chance to go to a lab in Innsbruck and could see a single atom fluorescing. But for the most part, of course, you can't see these things. And so the pictures we draw of them are kind of our artist's interpretation. On the right is a superconducting quantum device, which is the kind that Google builds. This one's from IBM. And so each sort of pattern you see there is 4 artificial quantum atoms. And what we're trying to do now is use quantum physics in its full power to develop new technology, to create new devices. And probably the holy grail of this research is a quantum computer, which would solve existing problems that are just not solvable today. And probably will solve problems that we haven't even thought of. This is just one of many emerging technologies. So I want to give you kind of an analogy for what, say, a child growing up today might experience. Okay? Kind of a lesson, if you will, from the secret that I had. When I asked this question to people of generation above me, say Gen X and baby boomers, the name they come up with is Bill Gates. And Bill Gates' success story is not that much different than mine, except in the number of zeros on our bank account statements. So he had a very unique opportunity to play with early digital computers. And I think that he would claim or thank the people that gave him that opportunity for the numbers of zeros that he has on his bank account statement. So it was, I think, this play, this sort of access to test and tinker in sort of an unconstrained environment that led him to at least his first unintentional success. of course, what came after was very intentional. So my claim is that 20 years from now, there will be a quantum technology equivalent of Bill Gates, and that future leader is just an 8-year-old child today. And that child will have access and opportunity to play with quantum technology and come of age with this quantum technology revolution. That's my 8-year-old daughter, and she's playing with a quantum computer. So the IBM has a cloud-based small quantum computing device that you can go and play with, and there's this graphical editor to create quantum algorithms, and you hit run, and it runs on a real quantum device. So perhaps that person will be her, but perhaps not. The only thing I know is that it definitely won't if she's not given access to it. And so that's my secret. And I'm confident that I dodged my fear of being an infomercial because I didn't really give like a secret recipe, and there wasn't a one weird trick that's going to make life coaches angry or anything like that. The answer I want to give to parents that there's no like simple steps to become a leader, say, in quantum technology or physics or science more generally. The road to success is not sort of laid out in front of you with paved stones. I think that sort of road analogy is a really bad one. What I wanted to convey is that success is something kind of more what you build up underneath you. And that comes from kind of like creating this scaffolding and spreading it around you. And as an adult, we're sort of free to create this variety for ourselves of opportunities. And I really think that we should, and that's the thing I'll tell parents, is that one of the most important things is that you need to do this because the important people in your life are the ones that are watching and the ones that are learning, and they need to see what it is to play and tinker and really struggle, I think, with big ideas. Thank you.
So your very first book, what inspired you? How did you get started?
Right, so the first book was Quantum Physics for Babies, and I certainly wouldn't have done it if I hadn't had children of my own. So I was in a store and I saw, buying books for the kids, and I saw some kind of technology, I think it was one of these like coding for kids books, and I thought, oh, that's a great idea. That's what I want. I don't want any more first farm animals books. I want some technology books. And I started looking and seeing, well, there's not that many available. And I thought, maybe I could do this. Maybe I'll just write about a science book. And I started to think about it. And when the idea quantum physics for babies popped into my mind, I knew, that's at least going to get some double takes. So I think that's kind of how it started.
What was the funniest reaction when you first told people the title of your first book?
Well, when I started, so I self-published it initially. So I had copies myself, and I would give them to my children's teachers, and they would look at it, and they would kind of like squint, and then they would laugh, and then they would hand it back, and I would say, no, it's a real book. Open it, open it up. But I get lots of funny stories. The funny ones are like stories of children repeating lines from the book in public to people. Like kids arguing at the playground saying, you're not made of energy, I'm made of energy, that sort of thing. And then in the book that I showed you, Goodnight Lab, I was drawing a picture of the grumpy old professor. So in the book, the grumpy old professor is shouting, publish. So it's a parody of Goodnight Moon. So if you remember Goodnight Moon, there's an old lady telling the child to shush. So in Goodnight Lab, it's a grumpy old professor shouting, publish. And someone tweeted me and said, thanks a lot, Chris. Now my toddler's running around the house yelling at me to publish. And I thought, yeah. Achievement unlocked. That was what I was going for.
So my wife and I both study operator algebras, and she is about to give birth in 2.5, 3 weeks-ish. So I was wondering, how was it having a kid, having to go to conferences? How was your personal life? How was your life with that?
Sure. I think that as an academic, you depend. I mean, this is different for every academic, but in a sense, I've been really lucky in having a lot of freedom. I have this amazing partner who really wants to stay at home and raise her children, and I was able to take time off. I mean, my first 2 children were born when I was finishing my PhD, and I was nearing the end, so I was just writing up, and people don't expect you to be around anyways, and so I could really be at home a lot. And in many ways, it was a transition for me because before, all of my free time, I feel like, I don't have a better word for it, but maybe wasted, playing way too many video games. And the child comes along, and now you have this extra responsibility, and you're like, okay, well, I really need to finish this thesis because I'm going to need to start earning money. And so I felt like after the first child was born, I was far more productive than I was before that. And there's lots of times where you'll be able to get work done. Well, maybe you don't want to get work done at night, but as an academic, you want to get work done at night, where you can rock the thing with your foot and type your thesis on the laptop. So I've been really lucky. I mean, I don't have a secret. Thank you.